The first batch of the NBA Cup quarterfinal games are done. We'll talk about the winners, the losers, the fantasy takeaways, and then we'll also go across to the Atlantic Division and look at some takeaways from the first 30% of the NBA season. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NBA fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd, and we're going to answer one of life's age-old mysteries, whether Isaiah Hartenstein can actually say the N-word. I'm also the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Blue Sky, joshloyd.bsky.social, on Twitter at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, use the code LOCKEDONNBA, and get $20 off your first purchase. Thank you also for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free, and we are available on all platforms, so give us a thumb up and a double bang, and go ahead and check out Locked On Daily as well, where you can sign up and get all the information for your favorite team with a newsletter, the best newsletters in the business, BITB, the BNITB, in fact. Go and sign up, lockedondaily.com. First batch of NBA Cup games, NBA Cup knockout games are done. And like I said, later on in the show, we're going to go through and look at the Boston Celtics, Brooklyn Nets, New York Knicks, Orlando Magic. No, not Orlando Magic. That's what we're doing later. New York Knicks, Philadelphia 76ers, and our Toronto Raptors. We'll cover off some of the information, just how things have sort of traveled with those teams as we move forward here. So let's take a look at what we need to take a look at for the news to begin things off during the day here. And the first thing we're going to look at is just a little bit of a news update. And it's not super concrete, but we got at least people saying the words around Scotty Barnes and Emmanuel Quickley's name. Does it tell us anything? Not really. Yeah, Quickley's getting some more imaging done, apparently, and then he's still on track to be reevaluated at some point. It is really frustrating. I would be doing my darndest, which is a word that people who are 100 years old say, to try and hold on to Emmanuel Quickley, because I do believe that there is a top 50 player in there this season. It has been incredibly frustrating. What, he's played 4 games? I think that we have to hold on to him. But I get it. If you get totally squished and you are just bleeding games played every week and you've got multiple other injured players, I would not be holding him in that very, very specific circumstance. But also, look at who you're holding. Who are the guys that are taking up your injured slots? Because I would think that there are people who are looking at Quickley as a top 100 guy, and I wouldn't. I'd look at him as a top 50 guy. So when you're valuing who do you keep and who do you hold and who's worthy of stacking up that injured slot, I think Quickley is. We just don't know when he's coming back. And I firmly believe he is coming back. As for Scott Barnes, I just don't know. They said that the x-ray was negative, but the worry with that and the mechanism of action did look mid-foot-ish, and that is a common source of a Liz Frank injury, and apparently there's a ton of misdiagnosis on x-ray with Liz Frank, and it normally comes up on an MRI or sometimes a CT scan. I believe it's up to 30-35% that get missed through x-ray. And if it is a Liz Frank injury, a Liz Frank sprain or Liz Frank's fracture, which is across, again, the middle of the foot, that's close to season over for Barnes. I don't know if that's the case. It might not be. In fact, the fact that it's ruled out through x-ray immediately is a good sign. But I don't think that we're getting Scotty back here at any point in the next week or two. I would say that if he played a game in December, I'd be pretty surprised. But all we know is that he is heavily limping. That is the update we get on Scott Barnes, and that's it. The other update we get is about a bunch of conjecture regarding Kawhi Leonard. Still nothing concrete, and I wouldn't expect anything less from the Clippers and Kawhi. But there's the report that his bobblehead game... Bubblehead? No, not bubblehead. Bobblehead. Bobble. Like bobble, not bubble, as in blowing them. I'm sure you can't even understand the difference between what I'm saying. But his bobblehead night is coming up in a week or two. And he's doing some practice work. He's doing a little bit of on-court stuff. He's still not taking contact. Right, so I'm sitting here, and my date is the 11th of November, or December, Jesus Christ, I wish it was November, 11th of December, no contact, what's he going to be ready for the, no, I believe the bobblehead's the 19th, I really don't think he's going to be ready and playing in 8 days, but maybe it's Christmas, maybe it's New Year, I don't know. The only situation that I would be adding Kawhi off waivers is if I'm sitting in first with a significant lead. I think it's going to be a problem all season. I do not think he's going to be able to just play out the string the rest of the way. He's awesome. He's still going to be awesome, right? But it's going to be how often does that awesome show up and how many times does the swelling take hold and really kill the momentum. And that's where the worry comes in for me with Mr. Leonard. Let's take a look at some waiver wire trends across the NBA in the last 48 hours who have been the most added players for fantasy leagues. And number one on that list is Kelly Olynyk, which I think is a response to the Scott Barnes injury. Now, he has not played in the minutes so far this season. He has not played power forward. They really don't have backup centers. Now, he's a horrible defender, Olynyk, so I would think that they could try and get him into a different position, but there's also guys like Abaji and there's guys like Mobo, younger guys who can play at the four. So I understand it because he's very clearly the best fantasy option there, Olynyk. But I'm also worried that it's just not going to amount to anything. But, sometimes we just have to take that crack at stuff, don't we? Cole Anthony, the second most added player, and this brings up a really interesting discussion re-fantasy because we'll talk about the Magic game later, but to say that is an open-mouth fart reception from Cole Anthony is a bit of an understatement. But everything that you did in terms of making that decision, and I added Cole Anthony, was sound. They need someone to generate shots. Well, he did that. Last game he played 28 minutes and scored well, and all that made sense. The problem is that 10% of the shots went in, so they just decided to go in a different direction. So, does that mean that every game from now on, Anthony's going to play 15 minutes? Probably not. Does it mean he's going to shoot 12%? Also not. Because if you had that idea, that is the same sort of thought process of every game is going to be awesome for the players who went off today, like Mr. Black, which again is not true. So, it's not an incorrect stream to have added Anthony. The results are less important than the process in trying to determine your future outcomes. And the shots just didn't go in, so they went a different direction. Doesn't mean they don't go back to Cole in the next game. They might not, but it doesn't mean that they won't. It's not guaranteed. Still, stinking game. Justin Champagny, that's the Wizards guy. Okay. Honestly, there are 4 blokes out on that team, Sarr, Kuzma, George, and Kispert, that if 2 of those guys are back, maybe even 1, Champagny probably doesn't even play. So, I get there's a bit of chasing involved there, and that's actually a ton of chasing. I'm not so certain that I'd bother with it personally. Alex Caruso was added. Last game, we saw 24 minutes out of him. That Thunder game is not finished when I'm recording this portion of the show, so we'll talk about that later. BJ Boston, people saw the big scoring output last game without Ingram. That required 65% shooting. I am not overly enamored with adding him, but in a week with so limited the amount of games that are being played, if you want to, do it. That's okay. But I don't think it's any sort of long-term solution. And then TJ McConnell, that one I'm very much more into now. That is obviously chasing the big performance last week. And he's been a guy that we've been looking at as a really strong stream guy for a few weeks now. But people chase that really big scoring night, and we'll see whether it holds up. But at least he's got that role, I think, for at least the short term, sort of locked up. Let's take a look now at the most dropped guys. Number one, there is Gershon Yabusele, who played 13 minutes last game and then got benched. That doesn't mean, again, like the reverse Cole Anthony, it doesn't mean that he plays 13 minutes every night from now on. And self-branded hat legend Nick Nurse told us as much. He said we had probably just a matchup thing. So the next time the Sixers play, which is Friday, I believe, Yabusele might be starting next to Embiid. He might play 25 minutes. I don't know. It's also absolutely no problem to drop Yabusele. He's not this high upside, unbelievable option that's going to kill other teams and be this fantasy savior for you. That's not real. So I've got no problem with that. People dropping the 2 rookies who were the hot commodity 2 to 3 weeks ago, Dalton Connect and Jared McCain, because they represent the archetype of player that you can't trust. The guy that needs big minutes, big usage, and well above average efficiency to provide fantasy numbers. And when the shots don't go in, the coach cuts their minutes. They don't do anything else. And we have seen that for both of those guys. Now, totally fine. Drop them. Move on. Re-add them later if you want. All good. Grayson Allen was dropped. Why? I have absolutely no idea. I thought the last game from him was pretty good, and the game before that was pretty good. And as long as KD is out, Allen probably should just sit on your team. But I guess if he's your worst player and you wanted to stream in through the NBA Cup, that makes a little bit of sense. Brandon Pajewski was dropped. Reasonable, except for this one thing. The only reason that you wouldn't want to drop Pajewski is that there's 4 teams that play tomorrow, and there's 2 of those teams with really no real streaming options. So I probably would have wanted to hold him there. Speaking of that, Josh Hart actually popped up on the injury report, questionable with an ankle problem. I don't know how that happened or why that happened. And Alperen Şengün popped up with a questionable tag for the Rockets, but Eason and Van Vliet are both probable. No, sorry, they're both off the injury report, so they're available. We just got the randomness there of old mate Şengün and Josh Hart popping up on the injury report. The last name on that list is the pencil Harrison Barnes. Barnesy. Ah, yes, the soothing sounds of Harrison Barnes. Good, fine, drop him. Who cares? Yeah, move on. Drop him. You don't need to be rostering him. He is getting minutes that are varying a lot, and there's still a lot to figure out in that rotation with Castle, with Vassell, who seems like he's fine, but still on a minutes limit, with Sohan's weird 22 minutes a night, with Champagny getting more minutes now with players back than he was earlier in the season when they were out. It's still a very confusing and at times frustrating rotation to try and deal with. We're going to come back and we're going to talk about the games in the NBA Cup in just a sec. Today's episode, though, is brought to you by the big fellas over at FanDuel. Yes, FanDuel. Get ready to tackle all of the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because now, new customers can bet $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything that you need to place those live bets. All of the live updating stats are there. All of the live play-by-play is there as well in that same place where you would place those live bets. So go ahead and join FanDuel.com today and get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And don't forget to gamble responsibly. All right, shall we go in now and take a look at the games? First one up is your Orlando Magic and the Milwaukee Bucks. The Magic put up a pretty good fight, actually, against the Bucks. They were clearly undermanned. They lose at 114-109 as the final score. Of course, as per usual, the end of the game took forever. You know my solution to this. Timeouts, get rid of them. No one needs them. I know, but don't say it. I know it's for ad revenue. I know that, but they make the game worse. Clearly worse. Also, get rid of fouls. Get rid of the ability to foul when you're leading. It's ridiculous. You should never get a benefit from fouling. This game, it slows an exciting, fast-paced game down and makes the end of these games, it turns the game into a meme, which is annoying. And I love the NBA and I love basketball. Doesn't mean things can't be fixed. And I don't know why that's so difficult for people to see. Not you guys, I'm sure you see it. The Magic had no Banchero and Wagner. And then John Isaac, who had a cramp, and that's caused him to miss 2 games now. They're one of the worst cramps of all time, which of course wasn't a cramp. They either lied or misdiagnosed a hamstring strain. They were all out there as well. Gaz Harris remains out. But what about the big fella, Jalen Suggs, who without these players there, Wagner and Banchero, he has really stepped up. 38 minutes for Suggsy, 32-9, 3 threes, 4 steals and a block. The only thing he's missing is he didn't get an assist. He got 1. He shot 26 times. I am going to gather that is the most that Jalen Suggs has ever shot in a game. 35 usage. Now, there are going to be games where he has horrendous efficiency. If he's asked to take on this load, it's going to be really tough for him to spit out really big numbers consistently, but a very good start. We're at 38 minutes of Goga Bitadze. He only had 12 points, but he had 14 boards, he had 4 assists, he had a steal and a block, and the role for Goga just sticks for now. The change will be when Wagner is back, I think. But for now, we're getting a really nice boost, and then that boost will come down a little bit when Paolo is back, and then it might fall away completely. But he has been another revelation. He was great last season too, and you know that I love Goga as a player. I just didn't think we'd actually get this from him this season, and he is absolutely cooking at the moment. It was a better game from Wendell Carter, 34 minutes, only 8 points, but the 11 rebounds and 5 assists puts him on the fringes of 12s. And let's talk about the other guys that could have stepped up. KCP? No. 7 points, a steal. They've got now 1 game, the Magic, in the next 7 nights. By the way, we know what is happening the rest of this week now in terms of games played. Because the Bucks win, that means that Milwaukee will play on Saturday, Orlando will play on Sunday. We know that. We also now know that the Knicks will play their 3rd game this week. They play on Monday, they play on Wednesday, and the Knicks now will either play Saturday or Sunday, and that means they will not play that Monday game. So we know that now. We just don't know the days, but it's really easy now. If you win the quarterfinal, you play on Saturday. If you lose the quarterfinal, you play on Sunday. That is the schedule for the week. And if your app doesn't have those games updated, I don't care. Ignore that. Please listen to me. The teams that win today, Milwaukee, they will play on Saturday. Orlando lost, they will play on Sunday. That is happening 100 million% guaranteed. That is happening. Let's talk about Mr. Black, because Anthony Black, last game, with all those guys out, did nothing. Nothing really changed in this game, but in this one, he played 32 minutes, he had 17 and 6 with 3 steals and a block. Looking through Mr. Black's game log is amusing. It's really funny. He's been better this season, sure. He's still not a top 200 player over the course of the season, but you'll see games where he does this, and then you'll see games where he has 1 point on 4% shooting and plays 21 minutes. His inconsistency is infuriating, and that makes him a very, very tough hold, especially now, like I said, with one game over the next 7 nights. Now, yes, every team that plays today, Orlando, Milwaukee, Dallas, and OKC, from Wednesday through to Tuesday next week have one game in 7 nights. But every other team has 2. Every other team has 2 games in 7 nights. These 4 teams have 1. So is it worth holding an Anthony Black, considering his inconsistency, to get 1 game in 7 nights when you could actually just use that spot and stream in multiple positions? I don't think it's worth having him. I don't think it's worth Cole Anthony either, because if Cole Anthony was going to play 29 minutes a night and be the second usage player on this team, you would probably hold waiting for Paolo to come back. But anytime that any level of doubt gets brought in, and again, I'm not saying that Cole Anthony is going to be a 15-minute a night player who has 4 points on 17% shooting. That would be stupid if I said that. It would also be stupid if I suggested he be a 25-point-a-game player. That's not realistic. But as soon as a real downside level gets put in, plus you're tied into a bad schedule position, drop him. Move on. We tried it. If he had got 29 minutes in a row, 2 games in a row with like 25 to 30 usage, then you're absolutely cooking, and then I would have suggested holding. But this level of uncertainty, see you later. Get out of here. You're off my team. Tristan da Silva keeps starting. He keeps doing nothing, and that's about enough of mentioning him. And it was actually a better game from Jet Howard, and that's one for the old deeper leagues, because there is an opportunity for Jet here to put up these numbers, to generate some shots. He had 10 points with 2 threes. This is deep league stuff. This is, of course, the Double Onyx Platinum Titanium League stuff, but he's at least in that rotation. Let's talk about the other side of this equation. Let's talk about the team that actually won the game, and that is your Milwaukee Bucks. They came in with the same starting lineup again. They had a very healthy team in terms of just who was available. The minutes limits still apply to some of their guys. Let's talk about Lillard and Dame. They're the same person. Lillard and Giannis is what I meant. Dame had 28, 2, and 9 in 39 minutes, and it was a perfect 10 of 10 from the line. He continues to play really high level at the moment. And Gianni had 37 and 7, but 2 steals and 4 blocks, and 63% on 24 field goal attempts is outrageously good. Unfortunately, he went 7 of 12 from the line, which is, of course, outrageously bad. And if you want to know a sell high, now I did a whole sell high buy low show earlier today, and I didn't include Punch Bob, Shit Bloke Bob Portis on there because he'd had 1 game. But this is the largest sort of sell high moment you'll ever have. Now, admittedly, I said everything was trending the wrong direction for Portis, and I didn't think he was a must roster. And of course, since I said that, that's not true, because I've said it about 3 weeks ago. But since the last time I said it, he's absolutely cooked the last 2 games. But let me assure you of something. There is not a single player in the world, including the GOAT Bob Portis, that will do this moving forward. Bobby Portis, over the last 2 games, has gone 18 of 21. He has missed 3 shots. 3 shots over the past 2 games. He has shot 7 of 8 from 3. Yes? He has missed 1 free throw and 1 3-pointer only. Now, he's only taken 3 free throws, so that looks worse. He also randomly chucked in 4 blocks across those 2 games. The game before that, 9 points in 21 minutes. The game before that, 6 points in 18 minutes. Portis is usually just a points and rebounds guy who's on the hottest streak of all time. So if anyone wants to buy that Bobby Portis is going to be a top 70 player, you shouldn't, but if they do, that's when you give them to him. It's like, have him and give me someone good back. Relatedly, that means Brook Lopez has really struggled. Now, he's also not playing well, but the fact that he's not playing terribly, but he's not playing well, and then Bobby Portis can't miss, so Glenn Rivers just leans into Bob. Brook had 7 points on 43% with no assists, steals, or blocks. That is 2 absolutely dreadful games in a row. In fact, we talk about Portis' last 2 games. Lopez is now at 10 points, 9 rebounds with no defensive stats in his last 2 games combined. He's averaging 5 points, 4.5 rebounds. Now, do you think you should drop him? No, you shouldn't. But obviously, that's really bad. He is now outside the top 150 over the last 2 weeks and outside the top 250 over his last 5 games. But he's still around the top 100 for the season. So I would hold on to... Now, it is I would hold on to Lopez. At any point, he could just be completely washed. That is true. He is old, and that can happen at any point. And I think there's going to be a lot of fluctuations with Brook this season. 3 weeks ago, I think he was a top 20 player. Like, that's going to happen. But this one, to me, is fueled by the fact that he was like mid, but Portis was unstoppable. So they just went with Portis. And that's what Glenn does. Chris Middleton only took 2 shots, missed them both. That's pretty weird, but he had 4 rebounds, 8 assists, and 3 steals. And the numbers he's providing in the low minutes are fine. He's actually been a top 150 player so far this season in those low minutes. And it is going to get better. It's just going to be a slow process. I think Andre Jackson's probably on his way out of the rotation soon, 5 points in 8 minutes, while Taurean Prince with Middleton back played 20 minutes. So you're only considering him a stream sort of a player. We also got more AJ Green in this game than we got Gary Trent, 33 minutes for Green with 3 triples, 24 minutes for Trent with 2 triples and 6 points. But that is what they are. Both of those guys are just streaming players for 3-pointers, and it's going to go back and forward continually, I'm pretty sure, through a large portion of the season. We've got one more game, the Dallas Mavericks and the Oklahoma City Thunder to talk about. Before we do that, today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. And in fact, it's brought to you by the new feature, Game Time Picks. What is Game Time Picks? Game Time Picks helps you find the best tickets for the event that you want to go to. It cuts out the nonsense tickets. It cuts out the bad ones. It shows you only the good options. So you're saving time and money. That's just the tip of the iceberg, though, when we're talking about Game Time Picks, because you've got the views from your seat. You've got the event cancellation protection. You've got the job loss protection. You've got the zone deals where you can pick a seat in that area and Game Time chooses or pick a zone you want to sit. Zone deals, of course. You pick a zone where you want to sit and then Game Time picks the exact seat and you save money on that as well. Always little bits and pieces to make your ticket buying experience better, easier, and you save some money. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create the account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create the account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right, now we can get into talking about the second game of the day, the Dallas Mavericks and the Oklahoma City Thunder. The Thunder get the win pretty comfortably in the end. Final score 118-104. The Mavericks were, in fact, without PJ Washington. He was dealing with that illness, so he didn't play. And they did the thing that I talked about on the preview, which I thought there was a chance that they would be able to do, and that is go small by playing Klay Thompson at the 4, because your opponent is running Jalen Williams at the 4, and that's what they did. So Quentin Grimes was the starter instead of a Najee Marshall. They did go smaller. I thought it was more likely that Grimes would start in a scenario where Marshall and Washington were both out, but that isn't what happened. We'll start with Grimes. It didn't really matter that he started, honestly. 4 points in 18 minutes. It was, in fact, Marshall, who Jason Kidd lied to us and told us would be limited to 20 to 25 minutes, who played 29 minutes and played like a starter. Najee had 19 and 4 with 2 threes. He's been really, really good for this team. He's missed about a week with an illness. He probably profiles more as a 14-team league guy, but there's obviously value there in games where players are out, where he can be used. The thing now, I should have mentioned this actually at the top. So, in terms of these games and what happens now, Oklahoma City now plays on Saturday. Dallas plays on Sunday. Against who? I don't know. We'll figure it out tomorrow. But Dallas will play on Sunday against the loser of Golden State Houston. Oklahoma City will play on Saturday against the winner of Golden State Houston. That's pretty easy to figure out. But Marshall was strong here. It was also a better game from Klay, but Klay is exhibiting those signs of someone that we don't love in fantasy. Someone whose value is entirely tied to scoring. 19 points, 5 threes. That, on the surface, is good. 50% shooting's fine, but only 28 minutes in a game where Kyrie and Luka played 40, and he had 4 rebounds, 0 assists, 0 steals, and 0 blocks. And if he doesn't shoot 50% from the field, it's just not usable. And he is a streamer for threes only, Klay Thompson. In fact, I think, can we officially do it? We probably can officially do it, I'd say. I think we're done with that now. Klay Thompson. Yeah. I think that is official now that Klay is washed. He's not the same Klay. He'll still have the occasional big game, obviously, but yeah, that is done. Dinwiddie, not worth the roster outside of a stream for today. He had 3 steals and 4 assists, but only the 23 minutes there. But let's talk about the big dogs. Not the best Luka Doncic game. He only had 16 points and shot poorly. 33% from the field on 15 attempts. That's obviously not good enough. His usage was high, but not where it usually is. He just didn't play well. But The good thing here with Luka, and I'm not going to compare and contrast Luka and Clay as players or fantasy guys. We know they're very different, right? But in a game where Luka doesn't get as many shots and doesn't shoot well, he still has 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 steals, and hits 2 threes, and went actually 4 or 5 from the line, which ends up being a pretty good number. Kyrie had 17, 2, and 5, and Kyrie has been just marginally down the last couple of games. Not terrible, but just marginally down. And it was an interesting game because Derek Lively started as per usual, and I thought this might be a game where we get the big minutes out of Lively, and then at halftime, it was Daniel Gafford who started. But once again, that didn't matter. Lively played 31 minutes, Gafford played 16. Only 5 points for Lively, but 13 boards, 5 assists, and a block, and he remains a must-roster player. If he's a 30-minute a night guy, Lively, he actually turns into more of even a 12-team points league must, which he hasn't been in the past. Gafford, it's getting iffy. I'm holding for now, but 9 points in 16 minutes, 100% shooting is fine. Bad from the line is also not very good. I think if you're in a 10 or 12-team points league with Dan Gafford, you are probably jacking.
Get that garbage out of here.
I would hold in category leagues, but if a 30-18-minute split maintains, then Gafford probably doesn't end up being a long-term hold in category leagues. We're not there yet, though, but that's probably the direction we go, I think, if that is what happens long-term. On the Thunder side of things, they did run out that same lineup, and it was 31 minutes here for Cason Wallace, which I think is probably the big story here. 11, 8, and 4, 2 steals, a block, and 3 threes. You know that I'm a big Cason Wallace guy, just as a general overall NBA player. His role has been confusingly up and down for quite a while now, but this is now a string of games where he has started 5 out of the last 6 games. He has gotten at least 27 minutes in 5 of those last 6 games. In fact, 6 of his last 7 games, he's had those numbers. He has gotten, in the last 4 games, 3, 3, 3, and 2 steals. His shooting is still a little bit iffy. He's still just more of a steals guy, but he is pushing himself to be like a 12-team league option. I don't know that he's a must necessarily because it is coming all on the back of steals, and his production's been pretty good, top 100 over the last 2 weeks. So I guess if you want to say that, then just grab him, and we see where we go. But there's still some doubt about what they do with him and Caruso and Joe and Wiggins, but Wiggins played 9 minutes. Joe played 17. Wallace played 31 in an elimination game. That is intriguing. Dort did his little thing, 11 and 6 with 3 threes, and that's fine. Like, he's streamable. And Caruso didn't get the 24 minutes, but he got 22. 6 points, 4 assists, 2 steals, and 2 threes. Who do I add between Caruso and Wallace? The extra minutes probably do tip it into Wallace's favor, but I do think that both of those players are 12-team category league guys, not points league players. Not a good Bronco game. And I'm not going to say that I'm concerned by it, but the fact that he was pretty bad in the playoffs, and in this game here, which is like not quite a playoff game, but elevated over regular season, and he had 18 points on 38% shooting, is a little concerning. It's not. I'm not going to have a massive problem with it, but no steals, no threes, 38% shooting, just a little concerning. Isaiah Hartenstein had 10 and 13 with a steal and a block. That's a little bit better than some of his previous games. And then not a lot else really going on, I think, overall. But the Thunder get the win. They move through to the semis. Dallas in the knockout or the losers game on Sunday. And that's where we're at with that schedule. And I think we're all pretty well across where we need to be with that right now. So to recap where we sit with that. So from the 2 games today, Orlando will play on Sunday against the loser of Atlanta, New York. Milwaukee will play on Saturday against the winner of Atlanta, New York. Dallas will play on Sunday against the loser of Golden State, Houston, and Oklahoma City will play on Saturday against the winner of Golden State and Houston. That is it. That is the only things that need to be rescheduled. So when you go to check your fantasy app, it may not be in there. This is what is going to happen. I 100% guarantee you this is what is going to happen. Guaranteed. Lock it absolutely all the way in, Mr. Maguire. That is locked in. Guaranteed. Yes? All right, let's give out some hardware, huh? The monstrous line of the night. No surprise here. I don't think it is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. 39 and 8. I didn't even talk about his game, honestly. Like I should have, but 39 and 8 with 5 assists, 3 steals, and a block. The waiver wire line of the night is his teammate. Well, it's not his teammate, actually. It's Wendell Carter Jr., who had 8, 11, and 5 with some other little goodies chucked in there. His teammate's actually the young gun of the night. That is Cason Wallace, who, again, was fantastic in this game with his 11 points, his steals, his block. He got his 8 rebounds, his 4 assists. Really, really impressive stuff again from Cason Wallace. And then your dud of the night. It's not Cole Anthony because he wasn't rostered in enough spots. It is Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, who's still rostered in over 70% of leagues' advanced metric on Basketball Monster, which is way too high. 7 points, 1 rebound, and 1 assist for KCP. Why is that coming up like that? All right. So that's the action from Tuesday. Done. In the books. Finished. All right, so let's now take a look at sort of where we're at, a quarter of the way through the season, 30% of the way through the season in the Atlantic Division, the same way that we did yesterday for the Northwest Division. Let's start with the Boston Celtics and the top 2 players in each of the different fantasy sort of rankings scenarios. Jason Tatum's going to be number 1 right across the board. He is. And if you're looking at just straight 9-cat rankings, he is the 9th ranked player. And this is all per game, of course. And then the second highest ranked player is actually Kristaps Porzingis. He is 16th. Now, his minutes have jumped up immediately. I didn't think that he'd be getting there that quickly. He's been great. We know that he's a top 20, top 25-ish upside sort of a player anyway. And that 9-cat number suggests that. I'm a little skeptical that he's going to be maintaining that number. If you ever look at him on the -1, where he's the second best player as well, 48th in that area. Because he does have this benefit from a low turnover game and solid enough percentages usually, which does boost him up in those 9-cat rankings. If I look at -1, Tatum's still the number 1 player. He's the 10th best player there. And Porzingis is second best still, but he's 48th instead of being 16th. You might be wondering where someone like Derek White is sitting in this. Well, in straight 9-cat, he is right up the top there as well. But if you look at -1, White's about 51st and Jaylen Brown's like 56th, which I think, again, makes quite a bit of sense in terms of their relative overall value. Points leagues, it is Jason Tatum, who is in 8th. So Tatum is 9th, 10th, or 8th. And he was going around that spot in a lot of drafts. And in the past, he hasn't really ever been there per game. He's usually been around that zone from a totals perspective, which is a terrible way, I think, of viewing things. But on a per-game basis, he hasn't been there. But he has elevated it up this season, and that's kudos to him. We'll see how long it sticks. And with Porzingis now full-time around, we'll see what it does for Tatum. But that's been impressive. And then Jaylen Brown in points leagues, 30th. Best player over that time frame, Porzingis 37th, and Derek White 55th. If we take a look at some of the advanced numbers, you'll be shocked to know that Jason Tatum's the best player on this team according to all those numbers, and he's actually way up there in all of these metrics. A reminder, DPM is Darko plus minus, EPM is estimated plus minus, and LeBron is LeBron from the Basketball Index website. So Tatum's the 3rd best player on the Celtics according to Darko, which is the forward-facing metric, so it takes into consideration what has happened and tries to project out the value of the player for the season. Tatum, 3rd. Okay, no one should be super shocked there. I'd say most people would have him top 5 at MVP this season. His numbers in all these metrics look super strong, actually better than his overall fantasy impact. Porzingis is actually 18th in Darko. Remembering again, this is a forward projecting system. That sounds about right to me as well. And when we talk about the value of Porzingis, sometimes I think we forget just how good he is. And yes, we know Jaylen Brown won Finals MVP and all that last season, but I still do believe that Porzingis is actually the 2nd best player on this team. In terms of EPM, which has 2 different metrics now, it's the forward-facing and the back-facing one. This is using the back-facing number, so what has happened in the first 30% of the games this season. Tatum is still 4th, and Derek White is actually 14th in terms of EPM. Now, they have got incredibly high numbers there because EPM does favor teams that win, because when you win, you have a higher points differential, and the PM part of EPM is plus-minus, so on-court impact and off-court impact is a part of it. So they've got Derek White sitting right up the top there, as well as the 14th best player in EPM so far this season, which is, again, some people would think that's a surprise. He's obviously awesome, but they've also got guys like Peyton Pritchard at 27 and Jaylen Brown at 74th, Porzingis at 54. So a lot of really highly ranking players. On LeBron, it is the same 2 guys. Jason Tatum's 3rd again, and Derek White pops up again on LeBron as the 19th overall player in the league. Now, no one's going to really talk about maximum Derek White as being an all-star or caliber player or anything like that, but a lot of these advanced numbers would suggest that maybe they should. I had him in the all-star mix at this time January last season, and we'll see whether he gets into that mix this time. He obviously made Team USA over the summer. We'll see how they decide to view that. But he's been ridiculously good. Again, clearly their best guard ahead of Drew Holiday and putting up really strong numbers. On the Brooklyn side of things, it's not quite as rosy. We don't have as many top-end talents there, and I don't think people would be shocked to know that. I think some people would be a little bit surprised to see how the rankings have played out. If you look at straight 9-cat rankings for the Brooklyn Nets, Cam Johnson's sitting as a third-round player, the 33rd ranked player. And of course, nobody believes that. Nobody thinks that Cam Johnson is a third-round player now. Nobody thinks that Cam Johnson is actually a third-round player as we move forward. That is incredibly fueled by his defensive stuff. His defensive stuff. His efficiency, but more importantly, low turnovers. Nobody would be viewing him as a third-round guy. Again, these rankings are incredibly flawed. The second highest player in their straight 9-cat numbers is Dennis Schroeder, who is 65th. Now, he started the season like 20th, 25th for the first couple of weeks, and he's pulled back down. I think in the end, Schroeder probably settles around the 90 to 100 mark, and then we worry about trades and fake injuries coming later on. For -1, Schroeder is ahead of Cam Johnson. You know the massive difference here between Cam in a straight 9-cat versus a -1. 33rd in straight 9-cat, 69th giggity in -1. And I think that around that 69 to 85, 90 zone for Cam Johnson feels about right. That was the area we sort of expected Cam Johnson to be in last season, and then he let us down quite a bit. And then he was going really late in drafts this season. He's clearly killed the expectations, blown him out of the water. He's shooting well, he's playing huge minutes, but he is, of course, a shutdown, trade, injury risk, all that stuff. In terms of Yahoo points, it's really close between these two. Schroeder is the 66th ranked player, and Cam Thomas is the 69th ranked player, and Cam Johnson's like 74th or something. So that's the first mention there of Cam Thomas, who's still dealing with a hamstring injury. He's not far off in -1 rankings as well behind those guys. But those three have sat pretty comfortably in that top area. Someone like a Nick Claxton we thought would be in that mix as well. He is not. He's actually nowhere near it. And that brings us to some of the advanced numbers. And Darko is a really interesting one here. Now, Darko to me is the number one most trusted forward-facing metric, I believe. It's the one that I would look at. The first one I'm trying to look at, hey, how's this player's value looking and how does it translate forward? That is what I would always go to, right? And probably out of all the ones that I've done so far, I looked at this and go, that's interesting. Why is Ben Simmons the second highest rated player on Darko for the Brooklyn Nets? All right, not that he's ranked particularly highly and nobody really is. But 137th for Simmons on Darko is a little bit eye-opening. Now, he's had a few little moments this season of good play, some bad play, of course, but the fact that he was there was somewhat eye-opening. And yeah, last time we saw Simmons play, last game, he was dreadful. But he had been starting to show better signs previous to that. So it's just something to watch. Their best player, according to Darko, is Cam Johnson, the 93rd ranked player in the league. And it's the same on EPM, where Cam Johnson's the highest ranked net player. Now, a little surprising that Cam is all the way up to 35th on EPM for this season. And I don't think he's been anywhere near that good, but that is an interesting number. Same as I don't think that Dorian Finney-Smith has profiled as the 41st ranked player. But EPM has him positioned there, and he is the second highest rated net for the season. So Finney-Smith's been doing little bits and pieces, and he's been like a streamable fantasy guy at times, but I think that's probably a little bit too far. And then on LeBron, Nick Claxton, just out of nowhere, the 60th ranked player on LeBron. I'm not really certain of that one. LeBron uses a bunch of luck-adjusted numbers as well as on-off staff and a lot of padded stats too, so it does take into consideration some previous season things to help normalize numbers. And then Cam Johnson is 127th as the second best player on the net. So he's not rated as highly as he is on Darko, nor as highly as he is on EPM. The Philadelphia 76ers on that, they're not next actually. They're not. It's the New York Knickerbockers. So let's talk about them. And I think most people will be saying, well, it's very obvious that Karl Anthony Towns has been the best player on this team this season. And that is true. In straight 9-cat rankings, he is the 5th ranked player. Now, I don't know if I was leading the charge on it. It doesn't actually matter, but I was very adamant about Towns being a fringe turn first, second round player. And if you wanted to get him in the first, that's fine. And 13th, 14th, go for it. Loved it. The profile all made sense to me in New York. I don't think that Mitchell Robinson's return is going to impact Towns, but he's been way better than I thought. 5th ranked player in straight 9-cat. Also, straight 9-cat has Josh Hart at 18th, which of course is again a load of crap. Like, he's not the 18th best player. I'm not really caring what you say. He's not. -1, places Towns at 8th, which is about right. Yep, that sounds about normal. Josh Hart at 40th still seems way too high. And I do think there is going to be some pretty serious regression coming for Josh Hart in the coming weeks because a lot of his finishing numbers, the rim finishing and some of the mid-range stuff is just not going to hold. I feel 100% confident that he is going to fall from here. So any top 50 guy you get back, any top 40 guy you get back is a gigantic W. In terms of Yahoo points leagues, you've got Towns at 9th. And Jalen Brunson comes in at 35th. And we haven't mentioned Brunson in any of the category league rankings. It's been a very slow start for him. I think there are pretty significant reasons for that. Obviously, number one there is Towns. Bridges' arrival as well. But also just the injuries that Brunson's had and played through. And he's just had some really bad shooting nights. I think we're going to get a pretty strong second half from Brunson. So he still sits as somewhat of a buy low to me. In terms of the advanced stuff, though, well, it does paint quite a different story. Because according to DPM, which is Darko, Brunson's still the 12th best player in the league. And that is despite having some struggles this season. But you might think he's having struggles. You might think that his performances have not been up to snuff because I didn't really mention him there in that fantasy section. But all of the advanced stuff still really likes him. 12th on Darko. OG Anunoby's actually 21st, which is way higher than I thought he would be. Obviously, his defensive impact is through the roof, but he was the 21st best player on Darko. And then you go to EPM, and Brunson's still 13th there. So Darko, forward-facing metric, Brunson 12th. EPM, using the back-looking one, still 13th. So, despite what we might think has been a struggle at times for Brunson this season, he's still actually being the most impactful Knick. The second best player on EPM is Karl Anthony Towns at 28th in the league, which, again, given his complete lack of defensive ability at this point in his career, the difference between him being 28th on EPM and 5th in fantasy is, I think, makes more sense to look at that advanced number zone there. Not that it matters massively for us in fantasy, and not that there's any real concern about Towns' numbers, but if Tibbs does get frustrated at any point and wants to sort of limit Towns because of defense and because Robinson returns, again, I don't think this will happen, but you can sort of see why. In terms of LeBron, Towns is actually rated the highest Knicks player there, 7th best player overall, and Brunson's 17th. So, again, Brunson's numbers from a fantasy perspective do not look as impressive, but in terms of the overall impact that they're having, they're still way up there as being very, very strong. Now, we talk about the mess that is the Philadelphia 76ers. In terms of the fantasy numbers, it's actually not that messy. The best player for fantasy so far has been Tyrese Maxey. If we're talking straight NICAT, he's 29th. Now, it's been a lot of fluctuations of 10th and 80th and sort of all over the place, but he's the best player for straight NICAT. Embiid, even in his limited time, this is all per game, 73rd. So even on a per game basis, he is well off the pace. I believe that's going to improve a lot. If you look at -1 numbers, Maxey's 27th, which accounts for some of his bad shooting, and Embiid is 31st, which removes things like turnovers and some of his other issues that are contributing to a very low straight NICAT number. Points leagues, we got 25 for Maxey and 41 for Embiid. You know my take on Embiid. He's going to be way better than this on a per-game basis, and I want absolutely nothing to do with it. I will not trade for him unless you're telling me you're going to throw as one of the worst players you've ever seen, and then maybe I'd try it out. I have no faith in any sort of prolonged run from Embiid. Yes, last game was great, but it's about maintaining that swelling, which I think is going to be a persistent and consistent and continual problem given the issues with his knee, and that is why I want nothing to do with him. On the advanced side, though, well, there's lots of different ways that these sort of metrics are viewing this team. The best player on Darko, again, forward-facing, is Joel Embiid, but he's now pushed down to be the 7th best player on Darko. Darko trying to look forward to your permanent production. 7th. In the past, you would have seen him 1st or 2nd pretty comfortably, but now it's Jokic, Shai, and Tatum up the top there. So Embiid's down to 7th, as we've seen just some small declines in his production. Interestingly, Darko still puts Paul George as the 17th best player in the NBA. Now, I think Paul George gets a ton of disrespect in terms of what he actually does as a player. It has not been the best start fantasy-wise, and I do think there's still a little bit of a buy low opportunity there. But Darko's still viewing him as a very important and very strong player moving forward. In terms of EPM, and this is EPM, this is per minute stuff, per game stuff, Tyrese Maxey leads at 51st. Embiid is not there, and Embiid is not even 2nd on EPM. The second best player on EPM for the Sixers is actually Jared McCain, which is staggering to me. He's 109th in EPM in the league. I think that's going to fall off. I think his production's already starting to fall off, and I don't think he's a 12-team fantasy guy. But the fact that he ranks that highly in EPM this season is pretty eye-opening. And if we look at LeBron, Maxey is 51st. He's their best player. And then Paul George is 2nd at 59th. And I think both of those players are going to jump up those ratings, as is Embiid. And this team remains a mess. But I still think there's a little bit of undervaluation of Paul George. And going by that EPM number, I reckon there's a little bit of overvaluation of the big fella himself, Jared McCain, which of course is a completely small fella. Now let's go to our favorite team, the Toronto Raptors. What are we going to make out from them? One thing you need to look at from the fantasy numbers is that Jakob Poeltl, what? He was a guy that I loved drafting because you could get him in like the 90s and 100s in some spots. And I got him in a lot of leagues. And I've been very happy with the result. If you're looking at straight 9-cat numbers, he's 41st. He's the best ranked player, and Scotty Barnes is actually second behind him. I wish we had more of an update on Barnes. We don't. All we keep hearing is he's limping very heavily. We don't have the results of the scans yet. But Poeltl, 41st per game so far. Barnes, 53rd. People were drafting Barnes at the turn of the first, second round, or at least in the middle to the back end of the second. And he has not lived up to that, even without the injuries. For -1, it's closer, and Barnes is ahead of Poeltl, which I think makes sense to more people. Again, this is where I will tell you about the flaws of a straight 9-cat system. There's not a single person who would tell you on a per-game basis they'd prefer to have Poeltl over Barnes this season. I don't think anyone would tell you that, but that's what those numbers would tell you. But -1, you've got Barnes at 30th and Poeltl 35th. Both third-round guys. I think actually they would split a little further apart if Barnes plays. Barnes goes into a better zone and Poeltl drops down a bit. Yahoo points, Scotty Barnes is sitting 15th, which, if you drafted him in points leagues, you're happy with that. Outside of the injuries, that number's good. And then the big fella, Rowan Barrett, 33rd in points leagues. We detailed him a lot on the show earlier today as a sell high, and people said it was crazy for me to say it's a sell high because Scotty Barnes is hurt. The fact that you guys say that it's crazy for me to have him as a sell high, means that he is a sell high. Because that means that people will be going, man, why would you sell him? I'm going to pay a lot to get him. To me, that is perfectly illustrating my point, because the points in that show when I talked about Barrett were not just about Barnes being out. It was about, well, he's just hitting these shots at an incredibly high rate. And yeah, he will have volume, which will probably stay pretty high, but quickly will come back at some point. But the fact that others will be like, no way, man, he's going to go even better, that means it becomes way easier to sell high on Barrett. Because there are things that are happening that have got nothing to do with Scotty Barnes that are going to come back. And that's why I was really, really focusing in on that as one of the sell highs today. If we look at the advanced stat leaders, Jakob Poeltl is actually leading this team in Darko, a forward-facing metric. Darko does not like Scotty Barnes that much. It has not really liked him much at all. I have been in the camp that Scotty Barnes at times is overrated from a real-life perspective. Probably not as down on him as what Darko is, with having him as the 72nd ranked player. But yeah, that is interesting. Poeltl's ranked 44th on Darko. He is an incredibly underrated and underappreciated player at times. For EPM, Barnesy sits 40th, and Darko, not Darko Poeltl. It's Jakob Poeltl. Their coach is Darko. Jakob Poeltl is 67th on EPM, so both been strong. Barnes, not as good as you hope. Poeltl, way better. And then, weirdly, on LeBron, Barnes is sitting 44th, which, okay, that makes sense. And then Chris Boucher? What? Chris Boucher is ranked 94th on LeBron. Now, he is probably going to be out of the rotation as we move forward here, but he has had an improved season, absolutely. That just struck me as a little bit weird that he sits there. And that is a recap of the games from Tuesday. We've got 2 more NBA Cup games tomorrow. I'm actually recording this before those NBA Cup games are finished. Actually, I'm just going to double check to see whether... No, it hasn't... Oh, it's almost finished that first game, to see what the result is, because that would give us more of an idea of where the Bucks... But you'll know about that from earlier in the show, so no point me talking about this because I'm recording it out of order. So you know what to do. You go ahead here and you thumb up, you double bang, you leave your comments down below, and remember, did you do a good thing today? Yeah, you did. Even if you can't find it, it's there. But I would go out of my way today to find somebody in your life, tangentially, close to you, whatever, and tell them about something good that they did. We all love to hear it. There's too much negativity out in the world. Let's be positive. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.